Hello, and you're very welcome to episode 82 of The Fifth Court, a podcast on legal affairs presented by myself, Peter Leonard, barrister and mediator.
Myself, Mark Tottenham, barrister and trust and estate practitioner.
Mark, as you will recall, we brought the second of our two interviews that were recorded at the Dublin Tech Summit, Arco Ganguly and international notarization and all that sort of stuff. People really enjoyed that interview.
Yeah, I think his enthusiasm really shone through, I think.
Yeah, okay. And I mean, it's very valuable work. And isn't it wonderful, somebody who is so expert coming to Ireland and saying, yeah, this is where I'm going to pitch the tent.
Definitely.
This is where I'm going to build my business. And we wish him well. Okay, well, after those forays along the technology stroke AI superhighway, I'm delighted to say, Mark, we are back on terra firma again. And today we are delighted to welcome to the studio a well-known Dublin solicitor out there in Blackrock, Kevin O'Higgins. Kevin is a former president of the Law Society and a president of the Dublin Bar Association, an organisation very close to our hearts, Mark. Isn't that right?
Yes, I think they have honoured us in the
well,
past.
you know, I mean, we have to say that, don't we? And of course, he is also a member of one of Ireland's best-known legal families. So we have a lot to talk to Kevin about. Really looking forward to that. But before we get to that stage, we're going to talk about three cases that you have identified from the Decisis website. The first is a judicial review, and unusually in this case, because they're normally argued on pleadings and affidavits, an application was made for a judicial review to be heard on oral evidence. Oral evidence alone, Mark?
Well, I think the affidavits had to be entered in the first place. But, essentially it was to do with the refusal of the College of Anaesthesiologists.
Can I say it?
Anaesthesiologists.
That's easy for you to say.
Sorry, I put the emphasis on the wrong syllable. Anaesthesiologists of Ireland. They had refused to recognise a qualification from somebody coming from outside the jurisdiction, and they challenged the decision to refuse to issue a certificate of satisfactory completion of specialist training. And so basically, it was all to do with, if I have it here, the applicant's case was that there was in fact a parallel pathway whereby a non-consultant hospital doctor was subject to the form of training and assessment, which on the applicant's argument was similar to that received by scheme anaesthesia trainees. And basically what Mr. Justice Simons held in this application was that it was necessary for the court to properly understand the nature of the training involved, and that the evidence on affidavit, which, as you say, is normally what happens in judicial reviews, wasn't sufficient. He did need to hear oral evidence.
Well, you always have the opportunity to apply to the court to cross-examine, the deponent of an affidavit if you need to do that. So that's always there. Though it's hard to get, it's a hard bar to meet. So this is the case of, I'm going to have a go at it now, Mark, Abdelletti versus the College of Anaesthesiologists. Anaesthesiologists, of Ireland. And again, a decision of Mr. Justice Simons in the High Court. So next to a personal injuries case, in this case, a man who had lost a personal injuries case sought to sue the state. The state applied to dismiss the claim. And, this is what the court had to decide. This is a case of Azevsky versus the Republic of Ireland. You're really challenging me here, Mark. Okay, and it's a decision of Ms. Justice Bulger.
Yeah, so this is a case, I had come across it before. There was a decision by Mr. Justice Bernard Barton, who had dismissed a personal injuries claim, and part of it involved the fact that one of the expert witnesses had failed to disclose certain relevant information, or it might have been the treating doctor. But in any event, the plaintiff lost his case. It went on to the Court of Appeal and to the Supreme Court, and then he brought separate proceedings against the state, claiming that he had lost his entitlement and that he missed out on certain constitutional rights. And the state, naturally enough, applied to dismiss the claim. And Ms. Justice Bulger heard it. And what she said essentially is, I'll just read out the quotation. In the within case, the plaintiff is seeking to relitigate a case that has already been decided by the High Court, the Court of Appeal, and in which the Supreme Court has twice refused leave to appeal. It is difficult to think of a more obvious abuse of the court's process, which affords a litigant a right of appeal, but does not allow them an unlimited right of appeal. So she basically said, there is no case here.
Okay. So, finally to our third case today, And this is an Isaac Wunder order. Now, we've explained that to our listeners on many occasions, Mark. I think I'm right about it. It's an Isaac Wunder case, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, and the litigant in person sought an order that he was immune from court summonses and orders. So what does that mean?
So basically, it literally meant that he was suing a number of High Court judges, claiming that he had some kind of state immunity. And needless to say, that did not receive much of a hearing either in the High Court or the Court of Appeal. The judgment here, this is the case of Lavery and Humphreys. The decision was made by Mr. Justice Allen, that's Mr. Justice Senan Allen, who dismissed it fairly swiftly. I think if I can just find the appropriate line here, Mr. Lavery's claim made no sense. In the same breath, Mr. Lavery was invoking and disavowing the jurisdiction of the High Court. Conceptually, the very making of the orders referred to showed that the defendants in those proceedings were subject to the jurisdiction of the High Court. So he's basically, yeah.
So he didn't really get too far with that one. Fair enough. Okay, back shortly with Kevin O'Higgins. Clio, the most recommended cloud-based legal software used by 150,000 lawyers worldwide. Want to streamline case management, automate tasks including your client intake process and billing while supported by a team of people 24/5. Visit clio.com/IE.
Silence in the Fifth Court.
It is my absolute great pleasure to welcome to the studio Kevin O'Higgins, very well-known Dublin solicitor. Kevin, president of the Law Society, president of the Dublin Bar Association. I don't think there's a chain in law that you haven't had around your neck. Am I right in that?
That would be right.
Is there any more out there?
I'm sure there are a few people laughing at that last comment, but we won't go there.
Okay. Well, look, come here. You're a very well-known solicitor, and you've had, a very interesting career. And we're going to talk about that. And also, you come from a very well-known legal family, so we have to ask you about that as well. Okay. But let's start with law, and you yourself getting into law. Now, I know the O'Higgins family associated with law since the foundation of the state, and before, I believe, and before. So there wasn't really the option of going off to join the circus or, opening a sweet shop or doing something worthwhile with your life.
No, but I did maybe dabble with, maybe journalism, and I was soon told that you wouldn't make any money from that. And at one stage, even in boarding school, I even contemplated maybe the Jesuit life would be one for me. I was a reasonably contemplative sort of person. But I was also dissuaded from that as well. So
by the Jesuits themselves?
Where was that? Clongowes, was it?
Yes, it was indeed, yeah. So in my year in school, it turned out to be a very legal year. We had something like maybe 20 people went on to become lawyers.
You're going to have to tell us more about those. So who are we talking about here?
Well, we're talking Judge Alex Owens was in my class.
Oh, very good, okay.
And the rest would be solicitors around the country.
Okay, well, we won't ask you what specific year, but that's very interesting. So anyway, you left Clongowes and UCD, was it, or Trinity, or where did you go?
In those days, you did what was known as the first law solicitors exams, and if you passed that, you then started on the road. We were able to do the first law exams in UCD, which was the BCL year. So you did the core subjects there, property tort contract. And then we went to Earlsford Terrace to do company law. Larry Shields would have been our lecturer then. Then you did the second law exams. It's all changed now because what then became the new system is now very much, it's about 40 years old now. So the new system is entirely different. Now you train in office, you go down to Blackwell Place for, it was 2 years, it's now 1 year.
Okay.
So it all changed. So in those days, which was the late 70s, you did your apprenticeship, and at the same time, you were trying to pass these other exams.
Okay. And just in terms of your time in UCD, were you a debater? Were you an L&H man? Were you a dram sock man? You have a dramatic side to you, I think,
No, I did. I would have participated at the Solicitors Apprentice Debating Society, but not in UCD, not in the Law Soc or indeed the L&H. Mainly because we weren't really in UCD. I wasn't really in UCD until much later when I did the European Law Diploma.
UCD had moved out to Belfield at that stage.
That's right.
And there was only a few aspects or few academic subjects that were still in Earlsford Terrace.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, ours for terrorism and UCD, we kind of piggybacked with the, BCL, core subjects. And if you pass those, you finally got into the law school, which was then just moving to Blackwell Place.
Okay, so it was a sense of transition.
It was, yeah.
But you had the great good fortune of being beside Hartigan's.
Hartigan's was a great pub, a great university.
It was a great pub. Okay,
Yes.
so you went from there, so you trained, and I saw somewhere in your backstory, because you're very much doing your own thing, but in your backstory you went into Arthur Cox, am I right? You kind of went down the corporate route? My
first job was down in Mohill, County Leitrim, in fact, and I spent 3 very, very enjoyable years down there. It was very good litigation practice, very good general practice. My father had been the lead barrister there for many years with the firm. It was 1980s Ireland. There weren't too many jobs around. And so he said, why not go down to Mohill? And I thought, that'd be fantastic. And I had 3 really, really enjoyable years down there, some great people. It was a practice that perhaps was on the wane, but it had been a stellar practice. In fact, the original founder had, if you read the Irish reports, you will see J. Delaney Gannon all over it. They had many constitutional actions. One of their sons was sadly killed in a private plane crash because he was racing up to Hamilton District Court from County Tipperary, and where the judge would never give an adjournment. It was a Monday morning. He had about 50 cases on. He had to be there. He perhaps shouldn't have,
Very, very.
So there was a tragedy. So I came just after that.
Yes.
And
Leitrim life. You were a Dublin kid. I know you went off to boarding school and stuff. But is Clongowes and Kildare, is that rural Ireland? I don't know.
It is.
Okay, maybe it is.
It's just within the pale.
It's just within the pale. But yeah. So was it like, what were you down to the district court, and were you dealing
district court? A lot of that. A lot of
found-ons. I'd imagine.
A lot of wills. A lot of personal injury litigation. There was still, that was before, things went off the cliff. There was a lot of litigation, and what really struck me, they would sue anyone over anything.
Okay.
And
well, I'm going to note that comment before it went off the cliff, because I'm going to come back to you in relation to that. I want to get your views on that. But I did see Arthur Cox in your CV.
Yes,
so you did
right.
obviously come back to Dublin, and you did go down that route.
I did, yeah. And I was in Arthur Cox for about 3 years. Again, it was early 1980s at this stage, and the economy was really very, very flat, and there wasn't too much going on. In Arthur Cox in those days, there was about 75 solicitors versus, or maybe it was 75 fee earners, but it was a much smaller practice. But still, it was a very large practice in Ireland. So it just shows you how things have moved on. It was again, I moved on after a few years, and my next job was fantastic. Again, it was just a boutique firm on Kildare Street, and just a small practice. There was only one other solicitor, but he had such fantastic clients. His name is Phelan Mead, he's now deceased, but he had stellar clients, and so, but he loved getting the clients in, but not doing the work. So it kind of fell on your shoulders, and you had to learn quickly.
He wouldn't be unique. That's all I'd say.
Can I just ask? This may be a very basic question, but when you started off, then we're not just talking about the days before mobile phones. Photocopiers would have been relatively new when you started in terms of offices. Would you have even had a phone on every desk at that stage?
Yes, you would have. You would have.
Was your everyday work very different from your work now?
Yes. It was at a much slower pace, I suppose. But there was the fax machine, and that seemed to be revolutionary. The fact that you can send a letter and your colleague will get it.
There were faxes in 1980. Okay,
yeah, and these awful things called telex machines, which you'd hear all day spinning out. But so we'd moved on from the joy of sending the letter. Well, it'll take 3 days to get that, and therefore, we had begun to be a little bit more instant.
And in terms of even things like typing up letters, were you doing your own typing, or were there typing pools and
a pool,
that kind of thing? And but manual typewriters as opposed to any kind of word processor.
Yeah, maybe maybe some computers were coming in, but there were huge things.
Yeah. And so even somewhere like Arthur Cox, which presumably even in those days would have been a reasonably large firm, where you were still talking very, very different work practice.
Wasn't there a lot to be said for sending a letter off and it arriving 3 days later?
Exactly.
This instantaneous email and wanting an instantaneous reply. Uh-oh.
Yeah.
Okay, but you obviously wanted to do your own thing, Kevin. So you're originally Blackrock, are you, at that neck of the woods? No?
Originally Dalkey.
Okay.
And then we moved to Sandycove. And so Blackrock was
that
convenient. I was a number of years in Dunleary. I was about 15 years in Dunleary. Moved to Blackrock about 20 years ago.
And that was as Kevin O'Higgins, solicitor, your own firm.
That's right.
And why your own firm? What's the desire to have your own firm?
Just I love people. I love controlling the work I do and the type of work I do. I would never have been comfortable in a larger organisation where every Monday morning you're rounded up and they say, okay, what fees are you bringing in this month? I would have hated that. I would have found that very pressurized, and I really admire people in the larger offices who get through it. But I do feel that it's a pressure I didn't want. I prefer to run my own operation as keen and mean as it needs to be profitable. And I mean, I don't have fancy offices. Never gone the route of staff and everything else. For the last maybe 50, for the last 10 years, it's just me. I don't even have a secretary. So
wow.
So
okay. So you really are a one-man band.
Absolutely, and love it.
Yeah, great. No, I love it. I love it as well, I have to say. Okay, you did mention your dad there being kind of a lead barrister working in, out of Leitrim, and I'm sure working all over the country. That's and representing clients all over the country. We have to talk about your famous, ancestry in terms of the law. Obviously, going back to the first Minister for Justice in the state, Kevin O'Higgins, your own namesake. But even before him, your family were involved in law in Dublin. Am I right about that?
It's funny though. Medicine was big as well because my father's father was a doctor, and his father was also a doctor. So so there was medicine there, but also there was law going back to T.D. Sullivan, who would have been my great-great-grandfather. His brother was one of the Parnellites. His name was A.M. Sullivan. So T.D. Sullivan and A.M. Sullivan set up the Freeman's Journal, which later on became the Irish Independent. And he was Lord Mayor of Dublin in 1884 to 1886. He lived in the Mansion House. My great-grandmother was actually, her wedding reception was in the Mansion House. That's where my grandfather got married, because he was a doctor in County Meath. He became the dispensary doctor in the village of Stradbally. And so that's where the connection then with the Sullivans and indeed the Healys from West Cork, that's how that was tied up.
But the Healys were anti-Parnellites, I think. And
yes, they became anti-Parnellites.
Were Parnellites.
Yes,
there was a parting of the ways at that stage? Or?
There was. So my great-grandfather ended up as a dispensary doctor in the village in County Laois and Stradbally, and that's where he had his family, a very large family of 15, including one of whom was Kevin O'Higgins, the Minister for Justice, and one of whom was my grandfather Tom.
Yes,
RTF as well.
T.F. O'Higgins, yes. Who, former Chief Justice.
No, that is my father.
That was your father. That's your father. Sorry, I'm getting slightly confused.
They were both TFs.
They were both TFs, but obviously, your father was. And actually, that was interesting. I remember when your father sadly passed away, I remember just watching the Dáil debate, and Alwyn Enright, who was the TD, Fine Gael TD for Laois Offaly, got up and addressed and spoke on his behalf and paid tribute to him. And I didn't realise that that's where he had been the Dáil deputy for Laois Offaly. But now you tell me it was Stradbally. That's where the family were originally from. Yes. I thought they were Dubliners. I didn't know that.
Well, I mean, my father lived in Dublin all his life, having been born in Cork City, because that was the tradition at the time that your mother returned to her home base to give birth. So that's why he was born on Sunday as well, which was very handy politically later on, because you were able to claim the Cork vote as well as the Laois Offaly vote, as well as the Dublin vote.
So when he ran for president?
He did, yes.
I thought that was the Charlie Haughey, the Fianna Fáil idea, but anyway. And go back to Kevin O'Higgins. I mean, he looms so large over the foundation of the state. And I mean, we're talking, we did a special show to mark 100 years of the courts in 1924. Right. He would have been Minister for Justice at that time. I mean, he was a huge figure, died tragically assassinated outside Booterstown Church. I mean, the legacy in the family growing up. I mean, were you aware of the magnitude of his reputation and his personality?
Very much so, and indeed I am called after him. And you've got to bear in mind that, just 4 years previously, his own father, the doctor in Stradbally, was himself murdered in his own surgery in cold blood. So,
and that was by anti-treaty forces in 1923. Yes. So it's after the treaty, after the new constitution had come in, I think, or was it? Yeah.
I mean, the Free State Constitution was in.
No, that came.
Yes.
Yeah, but I mean, just in terms of the sequence, was that before the reprisals of anti-treaty of the execution of anti-treaty forces?
Yes, it was before. It was before. Yes, yeah. So it was just for no other reason than he was the father of the Minister for Justice.
Okay, but it was specifically because Kevin O'Higgins was his son.
Yeah, and I mean, he recognised them. He recognised their voices. They were people from the locality. Yeah. So this and there had been a protocol, and it was an agreed protocol that, I mean, houses of families of government ministers were off beams, and he was going to a surgery to show them that protocol when he was shot in the back.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
And as you say, father of 15.
I mean, in front of his 9 daughters.
Right.
So that was because his sons, there were 4 sons, and 2 were in the British Army at that stage. Sorry, I had been in the British Army. One of whom had been killed. That was Michael, and then the 2 others, being Kevin and my grandfather Tom, they were in jail.
Wow. Okay. I mean, it's incredible history. And your father, Tom, we have to talk about him. I mean, obviously, as I said, he was Chief Justice and, a legendary figure at the bar. But can we go back to the presidential election? Okay. What year was that? Was that 65?
1966.
66. Yeah. 66. And he almost did it against... Was it De Valera the second time?
The
second time.
No, in 1966 it was against Dev. So
yes.
And in many ways, I mean, it was entirely unexpected. He was the last person. He was trying to encourage the party to encourage Johnny Costello to stand. There was a strong view that even though it was a foregone conclusion that Dev was going to win, many of the party supporters felt that there had to be a contest. So there was a famous parliamentary party meeting, and he strongly advocated that Johnny Costello should be the candidate. And then word came back that Johnny Costello wasn't interested at this stage. He'd retired. And then Paddy Lindsay muttered from the back of the room, "Well, Tom, what about you?" And then suddenly it was.
So there was an acclaim, by popular acclaim. He couldn't back out then at that stage.
I mean, he took on the contest with great relish. And he was only 49 years of age. He had 7 children. He started the campaign off in Stradbally, and he travelled 22,000 miles. He did 130 meetings. And bear in mind, because Dev, he was President of Ireland, it would be unbecoming for him to campaign.
Yes.
However, every single Sunday, because it was the 50th anniversary of 1916, every single Sunday there was reverential reporting by RT on everything he did every Sunday, with wreaths being laid in various spots all around the country. My father, even though his best friend and my godfather was the DG of RT, Kevin McCourt, they wouldn't give him any coverage whatsoever. So he had no coverage.
Committed public servants. That's what I love.
But
High standards.
He came quite close, though, didn't he? I mean,
he did 10,000 votes, yeah, which was about 0.1%.
Did he run again in 73? Am I
He
wrong?
ran again in 73 when I mean, at this stage he was favoured to win, but the funny thing was, whilst he became the declared candidate just 1 month before there was a shock call for an election. The Taoiseach of the day, Jack Lynch, called an election on the 2nd of February.
Erskine Childers for Fianna Fáil, was it?
Yes,
okay.
But my father was already the declared candidate just a few days previously, and he felt he would honour that commitment, and therefore the government changed because Fianna Fáil were turfed out, having been in power for the previous 16 years, and you had the first coalition government of Labour and Fine Gael, Labour being led by Brendan Corish and Fine Gael being led by Liam Cosgrave. So my father was out in the wilderness because he lost that election, because the government was now a new government, and maybe there was a feeling, well, we put Fine Gael into power, so maybe maybe there was a bit of that, or maybe the better candidate won. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, certainly he gave great. Isn't it amazing? In the history of the state, there's never been a Fine Gael president.
That's right.
2 Labour Party presidents, and the rest are Fianna Fáil. Douglas Hyde wasn't anybody. I think he was he was non-aligned, I think.
Yeah.
But so you never know. In another 2 years, I think they'll all be getting ready to go again.
Maybe President Fitzgerald sounds nice.
But he did become Chief Justice then. After that, wasn't that the case?
Well, he went to the High Court first of all. And then a year later, Billy Fitzgerald died unexpectedly within 10 months of that, and so my father was asked to be CJ. So
yes, okay, and not that we should get into anybody's personal politics, but I mean, when you think of the Fine Gael party traditionally in the history of the state, I mean, the O'Higginses, the Costellos, as you say, the Fitzgeralds, there were a number of families, Cosgraves, that were sort of defined Fine Gael politics over the years. Isn't that the case? Or is that maybe that's too simplistic?
At one stage, my father was in the Dáil, his brother was in the Dáil, his father was in the Dáil, and his sister-in-law was in the Dáil. They were all TDs.
Wow. So there was a very strong connection. And you still have an association with the Fine Gael party, don't you?
I do. I've been very fortunate to be legal advisor to the party for the last 28 years.
Wow. So I'd say that's a very interesting...
It's very interesting. It's very interesting.
Yeah, and so you get phone calls at all sorts of interesting hours, Kevin, in that regard. Every now and again.
At election time, certainly, yes.
Okay, let's talk about more modern eras, in terms of the law. As you said, you've been in it for a long time. The law at the moment, you're a sole practitioner, and you really are a sole practitioner, and I love that. What's it like? What's the legal landscape like at the moment?
I guess really, I've never enjoyed the law as much as I'm enjoying the law right now, and absolutely love it. I bounce out of bed every morning. I don't mind the long hours. Would be long days, and mainly because I spent 25 years at Law Society level and really enjoy that as well. And maybe now that I've been free of that for the last maybe 7 or 8 years, I've been much more time to concentrate on the important things, and I love looking after my clients. I'm lucky enough to my practice is on Main Street, Blackrock, which is a fantastic place to practice. I'm ubiquitous. Everyone knows me. The clientele are fantastic. A lot of my clients are second generational, so it really is a privilege to be.
Is there anything you won't take
in that area? Oh yes, I won't take crime. So that's what I'd say no to, and I'd probably consider much of everything else. Obviously not high corporate stuff.
Yeah, because you need, I suppose, a floor of solicitors. That's what I hear. Right. A floor of solicitors.
Lucky enough to specialise in one area, and that is franchising. And for whatever reason, I've always got a lot of franchising work because maybe I've been doing it for 20 or 25 years, and it's very interesting,
But if you say you work alone without a secretary, are you able to, obviously there's the stuff that you can do in the office, which is effectively the probate and the conveyancing and that kind of work. But are you able to manage litigation as well as that?
Yeah. I'm doing less and less litigation, although I'm doing a little bit.
And in terms of just preparing the papers, some of the courts can be quite exacting.
I do have a commercial court case at the moment, so right. I'm experiencing that. But
you can obviously farm out some of the preparation papers.
Yeah. I should say for the last 25 years, I've always been working in, I call it practice cohabitation. I've always been working in the same building with other colleagues just like me.
Okay.
So literally, I have a guy over here just few steps away, and literally I'm on the call. Sorry, I don't know the answer to your question, but I'll just give me a second, and I'll come back and say, actually, this is what we do. And my other colleagues there would be the same. So it's a great way to work, and also we share resources as well.
It sounds like the law library. You're each running your own independent practice, but you're able to bounce things off each other.
Absolutely, and we've been doing that. I've been doing that. My colleague Niall Coley, my other colleague Pat Igo, and for many years beforehand, a colleague who was in school with me, Jerry Lamb. Jerry's on his own in Dunleary at the moment. So, but I would agree if it was just me on my own, and maybe also because I've always been involved with colleagues through Law Society, through my bar association, etc. I've always networked with colleagues. I would have no qualms about phoning up a colleague and say, listen, I need help here. What do I do? And because I've been on the receiving end of many of those calls myself. I've never felt alone or removed or remote.
Okay. And if you were advising, say, somebody in their 20s, they're newly qualified, they don't want to go into a large firm, and you have the choice of going alone the way you do now, or going into a partnership or whatever. Would you sell that as a way to work? your own experience?
I think if you were starting up literally on your own, you had just got your practicing cert, I think it would be difficult to start your practice unless you had something behind you.
Obviously a bit of experience, but in terms of setting up your and into a small practice, I mean, being a sole practitioner is as advantageous as being a partner.
Absolutely, and it's really enjoyable. It's really enjoyable. That's the way I would see it.
And Kevin, but Kevin, isn't the culture at the moment? I mean, in fairness, you look at these wonderful complexes along the quays in the River Liffey and these huge firms, etc. And I mean, they're paying huge salaries. And then all these international firms want to come into Dublin, and Dublin is sexy as an international location because of Brexit. And I mean, young solicitors' heads are being turned by these eye-watering salaries. But, law was never like that, really, in one way. It is like that, and that's very much a reality in law. But there is also the smaller practice, acting for people, the knock on the door, something new comes in, and there is something new under the sun, because you never know what's going to come your way. Isn't that the case?
Absolutely. And I mean, I mean, the demise of the sole practitioner has been there for 50 years. It's certainly been there all my practice life, that there's no future. That, the end is nigh and everything else. I mean, I really don't see it that way. I mean, certainly in my work environment, there is, I have to turn away the work. There is so much work. I generally work 6 days a week because, I
have
to.
When Leinster are playing?
Well, they don't usually play on Sundays, so that's my day. But private work, or at least private client work, will always be necessary. People will always need to buy and sell properties. People will always need wills or EPAs, although that's another question perhaps. But they will always need private advice, and they are prepared to pay for it.
Okay.
And in terms of you talk about being a specialist in franchise law. I mean, this is basically where individual people are setting up a McDonald's or a Costa coffee or something like that. And are you generally acting for the franchisee as opposed to the franchisor?
Yeah, it can be both. I mean, I've done both. I mean, I was lucky enough to have piloted, the Sherry Fitzgerald Countrywide, brand, which was about 25 years ago, and that's has been a roaring success. So, I mean, that was on the franchisor side.
That's where people around the country see Sherry Fitzgerald Smith or Sherry Fitzgerald O'Brien, where individual estate agents have gone into the Sherry Fitzgerald.
Exactly, and I think I understand there's in excess of 100 such offices now, and having done the agreement and all that sort of stuff, obviously it took a long time, but there were never any issues, no litigation, no nothing. So it was a very successful venture. But yes, most of my work, many of the calls tend to be franchisee calls, and you're just advising them.
Kevin, I have to ask you one question. I think I know the answer already. With your family tradition, any interest in being a judge?
No. I mean, maybe some years ago, yes, perhaps just for the security of it and everything else. But I must say, as I said earlier, I'm really enjoying what I'm doing now, and I tend to stick with it. Judges have to retire at the age of 70. Please God, I will be continuing working beyond that and much more.
Fair play to you. Okay, Mark, we have our last question, which I've warned you about, Kevin. I have warned you about this.
This is the embarrassing one, yes.
Do you have a book or film or TV series or podcast that you would like to recommend for our listeners?
I mean, obviously the Fifth Court would be the podcast, and the reliable expert would be the book. Right. No, I don't read an awful lot of outside legal stuff or outside biographies or autobiographies. I mean, I did enjoy the book on Arthur Cox by our colleague Eugene McCague. That was a great book.
Is that a recent book?
It was republished. It came out probably originally came out about 5 years ago. But it's
definitely one for us, Mark.
Well worth it. Mm-hmm. In relation to TV, apart from current affairs, I don't really watch unless there's a rom-com on.
Are you recommending the 9 o'clock news in prime time then?
Yeah.
Go back to the rom-com.
Oh, listen. There'll be plenty. But yeah. So I'm probably very boring for you and the listeners on that.
No, not at all.
On that aspect.
Well, I tell you, this interview has not been very boring. It has been really, really interesting. Kevin O'Higgins, solicitor, Main Street, Blackrock. Thank you so much for coming in and being a guest on the Fifth Court.
The Fifth Court will adjourn until next week.
So that's all from this edition of The Fifth Court. We hope you have enjoyed it. Can I say a huge thank you to our guest, Solicitor Kevin O'Higgins. The joie de vivre. There's a man who loves his job.
Yeah, he enjoys life, enjoys the work. And I can't believe he's literally just, a complete one-man band. I mean, no support staff or whatever, but he still manages to...
Yeah, but he did say, though, while he does his own thing, he has support around him and colleagues and stuff. Yeah. And it sounds like a really pleasant way to earn a living. I really enjoyed that interview. Well, before we go, I would like to say a big thank you to our producer, Conal O'Moroyne, and to Alison O'Dwyer of the Dublin South Podcast Studios for her wonderful work in recording this show. Thank you, Alison. So from me, Peter Leonard.
Myself, Mark Tottenham.
Thank you for listening, and we'll see you soon in The Fifth Court.